Well, brothers, I thought again I'd record this session due to some other responsibilities that I had, but I wanted to make sure to review these last few assignments to give you another example to use as you go through the assignments together. And today, in this session, I want to give specific attention to uh, assignment 3.12. That's the next one in our study of poetry, and this assignment covers the word studies, resources, the exegetical idea of your assigned psalm. And just want to remind you that these steps now, after the poetic analysis step, pretty much everything after that is the same that we've done already. But again, sometimes there are some differences or things to remember as you go through the poetic genre as compared to narrative and epistle. And so just want to highlight those things as we go through. But a lot of this is just going to be reviewed, doing the same thing you've done before. Even the format of the assignments is essentially the same. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right in to our look at assignment 3.12 of the word studies, resources, and especially the exegetical idea, which again, this is the goal and the focus of the exegetical part of our study. Okay, so with that, let's remember again, as I just indicated, these are the steps for the studying of poetry, and we've already done these first six steps. The poetic analysis being the unique feature in the study of poetry, and we spent a lot of time on that one. And then the last couple of sessions, we focused on the block diagram and textual observations in the poem. So now what I want to do is just briefly look at our word studies. Again, it's going to be essentially exactly the same as we did for narratives and epistles. And again, these are the steps, same steps that we followed before, where one, identify the significant words in the passage. And I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on that, just reminding ourselves about um, finding good words to study. And then after identifying the word to study, look at the lexical definitions. That's the dictionary definitions for the word in the original language. Again, if we're looking at Old Testament poetry, so we'll be looking at the definition of the Hebrew word. And then how is that word translated in other English translations? That's our third step. So I've given some for recommendations. These are good English translations, the ESV, New American Standard, NIV, New King James, LSB. So look up how is the word translated in those translations. And the fourth step is identify other passages and how the word is used in those passages. And I have looked up at least 10 passages that contain that word and then identify how that word is used. Then look if there's any other resources or word study resources, add that in. And then finally, and here's the key one, summarize the meaning of the word in the context of the passage in your own words. All right. Don't forget that. That's the most important step. Now, what I wanted to do, I'm not going to go through all of these steps by way of example. You have that on your assignment. But what I do want to do is just give a little bit of attention to this first step, identifying significant words in your passage, because I've noticed that most of you do a really good job with these other steps, but that first step of identifying significant words, I think sometimes there could be better choices in the words that you look at in the text. Of course, you can study any word you want, but sometimes certain words just aren't going to be yield as much helpful information as other words. And so I wanted to take a moment to cover that and use Psalm 99 as an example. So let me go ahead and read this psalm, and then we will. Uh, I'll go through the exercise of identifying the significant words there. So, Psalm 99, this is the New American Standard Translation. The Lord reigns, let the peoples tremble. He's enthroned above the cherubim, let the earth shake. The Lord is great in Zion, and he is exalted above all the peoples. Let them praise your great and awesome name. Holy is he. The strength of the king loves justice. You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his footstool. Holy is he. Moses and Aaron were among his priests, and Samuel was among those who called on his name. They called upon the Lord, and he answered them. He spoke to them in the pillar of cloud. They kept his testimonies and the statute that he gave them. O Lord our God, you answered them. You were forgiving God to them, and yet an avenger of their evil deeds. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his holy hill, for holy is the Lord our God. Okay, so identifying the significant words in your passage. Remember, if you go back to the notes, if you go back to the syllabus, the student notes, you can look on this section under word study, and the details will be there. But I just wanted to highlight a few things here on this session, this Zoom session. First is look for words that are connected to the theme of the poem. So at this stage, we've studied the poem quite extensively already. So we have a good idea of the theme of the poem, the focus of the poem. And in the case of Psalm 99, as we have considered in previous sessions, and I put the psalm here to the right, really there's a word that's connected to the theme we see quite often is holy, right? Holy is he, verse 3. Holy is he, verse 5. Holy is Yahweh, our Lord our God, verse 9. So those those focus on the um, theme of the psalm as the holiness, God's holiness. They're a refrain, so they're the end of each stanza. So they really emphasize, make a primary statement within the psalm. Okay, so look for words like that that are connected to the theme. Another one that could be, exalt or praise, worship. Those are repeated as well in the refrain, and so that they too could be considered part of that theme, the command. But the holiness of God really is the key theme here. And then I mentioned key words in addition that um, key verbs, that is, and exalt and worship would fall under that. Because notice again, they are repeated, they are commands, they're given in the refrain. And so it's part of, again, the focus of this psalm. So those would be two other key words. So holy, exalt, worship, and then again, repeated words. Again, exalt and worship and holy would be under that category, but there's a few others. Justice is repeated, equity is repeated, reign in verse 1. Uh, so those would be words that if you see a word repeated through the psalm, then that would be one to consider as well. And then, of course, any unclear or puzzling words. Sometimes if we're reading along here, right, in verse 5, you see that word footstool, and maybe think, well, what does that word mean, and what what is it doing here? That would be something to consider as well as a possible word, or just any word you don't understand, you don't know, would be an option. All right. Also, look for words that are translated differently and for example, verse 4, the word strength also is mighty or might in other translations. Avenger in verse 8 also is took vengeance or punished. Those are similar in meaning, but slightly different. So look for any words that have a different translation that could indicate a word that would be useful to look up. And then maybe words used figuratively, just to understand what that means. And footstool might be that as well, because there's no footstool, literal footstool to worship at. So what that might be figurative for something else. Okay. So keep that in mind, brothers, as you're looking for words to study. Don't just pick any word. Be strategic. Look for those words again that are connected to the theme of the poem. Look for words that are repeated. Look for words that are connected to significant statements or commands within the poem. All right. Look for words that may be translated differently, words that are unclear, repeated words. So these are things to consider when you're studying word study. And for the rest of the word study, just follow the remaining steps. And again, most of you guys have done great with that. So after you've identified the word, then look up the lexical definition. In fact, let me just pull up the assignment itself here and just take a look at this part of it. Okay, so let's hold on here. All right, so here's the assignment for 312 that we're reviewing. Like, conduct word studies on three significant words. And I already mentioned that. These are the 6 steps to do for the word study. And then here's the example. This example is from Psalm 128, where I go through each of those steps, identifying the significant words, again, using the principles I just described to you. And then once you identify that word, find the lexical definitions, and then BibleHub.com, Blue Letter Bible, Discovery, the Discovery Bible app would be great resources for that. How is the word translated in other translations? So then put that down for the different English translations, and then identify how the word is used in other passages and look up, don't just put the reference, but actually look up the passage and record it, and then identify what the word translate where it's translated as in that passage. Okay, so do that for at least 10 other passages if there are at least 10 where it's used. And then if there's any other resources you can add in here, for example, I added the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament. And then finally, most importantly, summarize the meaning of the word in the context of the passage in a sentence or two in your own words. Okay, so that's the steps to carry out for the word study. Again, nothing new from what we've looked at before. And remember, again, the key is the meaning of the word in the context of the passage. That's the key. What does that word mean in the context of the poem that you're studying? All right. So following that, we can then focus our attention on the what follows in the next step, which is consulting resources. All right. And again, we remember that this is looking for, resources that would be commentaries or Bible handbooks, theology books, sermons, those kinds of things outside the biblical text that can provide other helpful insights or information um, of the passage that you're studying. And again, just remember, this is a step to do. This is step 8, not step 1 or 2. So the encouragement is do all of these previous steps on your own. And then by this time, you'll be very, very familiar with the passage. And I think then we'll be much more effective in using resources at this point because you'll already have a good understanding of the poem. You'll already have thought through and wrestled with particular, um, you know, much of the poem already yourself, and you'll have a good idea of what things mean and have questions in your mind already. But if you don't do that, if you just consult a resource right away, you won't have any of your own background or information. And so whatever the resource says, it'll sound right, and you'll just probably go with that. As opposed to having thought through and studied on your own, I think you'll be much more equipped to evaluate and consider what will be helpful insights for you in looking at that resource. Okay. And so I just had a few other thoughts regarding resources. Here's an example that I have from my study of Psalm 99. So just some resources that I encourage you to use. And again, I do want to highlight a couple of things here. Dr. Barrick, his study notes. In fact, I'll just pull that up here, and we can take a look. Nope. Uh-oh, having trouble reaching Dr. Barrick's website for some reason. Hold on a second. Let's try this. All right, there we go. Okay, and so here at drbarrick.org, if you go to the Psalms, and I'm doing Psalm 99, so I'm just going to find Psalm 99. Sorry, that's books 1 and 2. I need to go to book 3. Oops. Huh. All right, sorry, a little bit of a So Psalm 99 is here. Oops, I meant to go to the notes. And by the way, notice there's also an audio version. So this is actually recording his teaching through the Psalm to his Sunday school class some years ago. So that can offer some very helpful insights. And then these are his basic notes that he hands out to the class. And so he has several helpful insights. It's not as detailed as a full commentary, but he's got some great insights, great observations. You'll find that. And notice here, he talks about footstool. The Ark of the Covenant is called God's footstool. Worship at God's foot. So here he gives some of his insights on that particular element as well. Okay, so drbarrick.org is a great resource to consider. Tom Constable's notes here at the Plano Bible Church Chapel. These notes are a helpful resource as well that I would highly recommend. There's a few commentaries here that you may or may not have access to. I believe Kyle and Delich, there's an access, you can get access to that online. I'll have to look. Treasury of David by Spurgeon's a great resource for the Psalms. And so keep those things in mind. And then looking up sermons. I had a sermon from Psalm 99 from Austin Duncan at Grace Church that I found helpful. And that's a great resource as well. Let me just pop up Grace Church for you. And just to remind you, this is another great resource. So if you go to gracechurch.org and then just look up sermons, all right, this is a library, not just of Pastor John MacArthur's sermons, as you see here, but also of sermons, other sermons from the other pastors of the church there. And so I would look up, just you can go over here and look up Psalms. And if I'm doing Psalm 99, pop that one in, Psalm 99, and do a search. And then notice, got Abner Chow, Austin Duncan. Looks like there wasn't a lot of on Psalm 99. That's kind of interesting. But I'll bet if we go, say if you have Psalm 23, which some of you guys do, let's try that one. I'll bet we have a few there. All right, so Dr. Mark Tatlock, Josiah Grauman, Steve Mueller. All right, bunch of them. In fact, you'll have quite a few. Phil Johnson, Rich Gregory. So all that to say that gracechurch.org is a great resource for sermons. You probably almost have a sermon on every chapter of the Bible, or many of them will be there from really good teachers, a trusted source, trusted resource. So that's something helpful to do after you look at commentaries and other things, and then just listen to a couple of sermons or read them if you can find them, but read good resources, solid ones that are trusted. Okay, so as we consider the resources, what I want you to do, let me just pull up the assignment. So what you need to do for the assignment is to just identify the resources you used. So here again, just like I did for Psalm 99, just identify those resources that you used. Let me see if I have it under the instructions. Yeah. Refer to outside resources, what they include. Simply list the resource you used, identifying the author, the title, the page numbers, etc. Okay. So again, like I did for Psalm 99, I just listed out these resources. Now, that doesn't mean, okay, that that's all you need to do. Like, okay, I'll find where these resources are. No, obviously you need to read the resource, study it, examine it, identify the helpful features from that resource. Perhaps they answer some questions that you had about the text, or maybe had some insights you hadn't thought of. Or maybe as you compare your conclusions with theirs, they may have some some differences that will make you think a little bit if whether or not your conclusions are correct. So resources, good resources, faithful ones, ones that, again, you want resources where they believe in inerrancy, they're Christian, that they believe the right gospel. These would be important, basic hermeneutical principles they need to follow so that they can be a trusted resource. And for the assignment, just list the resource. But you need to use these resources to be helpful to you. And I suggest these two steps again, read through the resource, identify the helpful comments. So either highlight them, mark them in some way, but just read through the resource and just note it as you're reading. And again, the more familiar you are with the text, the more study you have done on the passage, then you'll, as you're reading through, a lot of things will just be familiar. You won't even need to take note of them, and then you can just focus on those things that the resource points out that, like I said, maybe something you hadn't thought of, maybe a better way to express it. Maybe they include an illustration or explanation that's helpful. Maybe they bring in another insight. So just read through and just highlight those things, and then go back and incorporate those. I would just take out those things you highlighted and summarize them, put them into a document which has all of your resource comments on it. And I've showed you in class how to do that specifically. Okay. So, but for the assignment, just list the resource you used. And then I would encourage you to be thorough in your use of that resource. Okay. So once we've done that, now we've completed all those first 8 steps. That brings us to the goal of the exegetical process, which is the exegetical idea of the poem. That is what's the author's intended meaning of the poem. This is the last step in the exegetical process. Again, remember, exegesis is drawing out of the text the author's intended meaning, what the original author intended to communicate to his audience. And so that's expressed, we express that in what we call the exegetical idea. And that is essentially how we've described this in class. And there are different guys have different approaches here, but basically it's stating the what, the why, and the how. The what is the subject of the text. That is the author's main point. The why is the context of the text. And here the key is why the author made that point. And then the how is the outline. And the poem, that's going to follow the stanzas. Okay? So let's consider the example of Psalm 99. Okay? And we have to go back when we were doing the poetic analysis of this psalm, that we found a pattern. We identified the stanzas through a couple of ways as we looked at Psalm 99. Again, if I pull up the psalm for you. All right. We noticed, first of all, we had this refrain at the end of verse 3, holy is he in verse 5, holy is the Lord our God, verse 9. That indicated perhaps the refrain that ends each of those as stanzas. And then secondly, we noted that the pattern, a grammatical pattern, where essentially there was a declaration made and then a command. So a declaration, he's enthroned, he reigns, he's great, he's exalted, and then the command, let them praise. Holy is he. And then notice verse 4. Strength of the king loves justice, you have established equity, execute justice. So there's a declarations about God. And then the command, exalt and worship, holy is he. Then verse 6, declarations about Moses and Aaron, called on his name, and that they spoke to him, and that God answered them and was forgiving. And then, so there are these declarations. And then verse 9, the command, exalt and worship, holy is Yahweh our God. So we have the same grammatical pattern as well. And so we identified 3 stanzas. And I've noted that over here on the left. Again, I separated this out for you. The statement or declaration in verses 1 and 2, then the command, let them praise. Stanza 2, statement and declaration in verse 4, then the command, exalt and worship. Statement and declaration in verse 6, verse 6 and 7, and then the command, verse 6 through 8, and then the command, verse 9. Okay? And so I think all of these, and then the command, we have the response, these declarations about God, and then the response, and then the final statement about God's holiness after each one of those stanzas. And so I would say the the key theme overall is, exalt and worship God, right? That's the primary command of the psalm. It's repeated 3 times essentially. It says praise him in the first stanza, but that's the same idea. And then why? Why this command? Why this main idea? Because he's holy. Again, that's mentioned right after the command at the end of each stanza. And the how then is the outline. Again, we have 3 stanzas, as I noted here. And I think what I had is in each stanza, the first one said praise him and it focused on his greatness, right? Notice, let them praise your great and awesome name. Worship him for his justice. In the second stanza, notice justice, equity, justice, righteousness focused on. And then it says exalt and worship. And then finally, the third stanza, worship him for his, I said, nearness. Because it's talking about this idea of they called on him and he answered. He's forgiving, he's avenger. So I had nearness of God as a focus there. And again, notice holy is he. All right. So each stanza notes the holiness element. That's why I have in the why, because he is holy. So the command, exalt and worship, because he is holy. And then there's 3 different aspects of his holiness that are focused on, one in each stanza. Okay, so that would be the exegetical idea of this particular psalm. And that's what you need to do for your assignment, is to identify that. Now, what I also like to do, let me pull up that assignment first, and then I have a couple of other comments here. Okay, notice we've got identify the exegetical idea as the third part of this assignment. And again, just put the what, why, how. And the example from Psalm 129 is in given for that. And it just states the what, why, how. So that's all you need to do, is just give the what, why, and how. So state the main idea of your poem, the why for that main idea, and then the outline, which are the stanzas. Okay, so just do that. So I have a space here for you on that. Okay. All right. So with that, then let me just do one other thing here on the exegetical idea. One thing I like to do after I come up with my own exegetical idea, then maybe go back to the resources and see what outlines, what main points they do some other resources do. So I have one here from Dr. Zemek, Roadmap to the Psalms. I have Dr. Barracks. Notice he titled it Holy, Holy, Holy. And then he had 3 stanzas. Notice the focus on the Lord is holy and his exaltation of his being, execution of his justice, expressions forgiveness. Derek Kidner had 2 stanzas, again, focused on holiness. Graham Scroggie had 3 stanzas. And you can see there where he focused in different things. And then the MacArthur Study Bible, they had 2 stanzas. So there are some differences. And again, some things you can think about, and sometimes we may be convinced to make some changes. Other times we may say, no, I think I've got the right focus on the Psalms. And then I've noted that the first 2 examples, Dr. Barrick and Dr. Zemek, they had the 3 stanzas and were similar to what I had come up with here. All right. But sometimes looking at the other resources can give us some insight, direction, ideas to consider in modifying our own. But again, remember, this is the exegetical idea. So this isn't our sermon main point or outline. This is the author's intended meaning. What from all of our study, how would the author have expressed to his people, to his audience, the main idea, the reason for it, the what, why, and then the how, the outlines. Okay? So hopefully that is helpful for you. Again, this is assignment 3.12 to review. And if you have questions on it, don't hesitate to contact me. You're going to do this for both your psalm and then turn around and do it for the text you have from Proverbs on the second assigned passage that you have. Okay? I hope that was helpful for you guys. And looking forward to seeing your assignments and seeing how you do. All right. God bless you.